Good afternoon and welcome to the first video that I am putting together for those who are interested in homeschooling or thinking about it, and also those who, with this current pandemic, have been thrown into homeschooling quite unexpectedly. It's my great pleasure to offer you a few tips and tricks and things that I have learned over the years, and I'm very happy to answer specific questions also. I would say the first thing that is important to remember is that homeschooling is very individual. So when you homeschool, one of the things that you learn quickly is that what you do is going to depend tremendously upon the personalities in your household and your own personality and your own schedule and so on. So take everything that I have to say, listen to it, digest it, do further research, and don't be afraid to tweak things up. At this point, I know schools are saying, oh, well, 2 weeks, then we'll be back. Looking at the numbers that I've been doing and talking to various people that I know that are in the analysis business makes me think that we are probably looking at more like a month. So plan for the long haul, because you can't just treat this like a snow day. And when you add in the additional complication of needing to work from home, that's a whole lot of stuff to handle. And so the first thing I really want to emphasize in all of these videos is be gentle with yourself and be gentle with your children. You're dealing with big transitions, and with big transitions come big emotions. So don't worry too much about producing all of the work that the school packet makes you think that you need to produce. And don't worry too much about the children having days when they are just not having lessons or doing anything other than being totally in your hair, because it happens even when we've been homeschooling for 12 plus years at this point. That's normal. And part of what you have to do is to take a step back. So I want to start with this video talking specifically about how do we think about homeschooling and how do we use the way we think about it to drive the way that we organize it in terms of our day-to-day existence. So first, I want you all to take a moment and take a deep breath and grieve for the fact that you have lost an externally imposed schedule. Much as you might have hated packing lunches or getting the kids out of bed or overseeing homework and how much trouble it was also a great gift, because you did not have to come up with all of those decisions yourself. And the thing that we know internally anyway, but we also know from science and from studying how bodies work and minds work, is that the more decisions that we have to make, the more difficult making each decision is. So the reason that we look at let's have a schedule is partly because we want to make sure we fit in all the things, but it's mostly so we don't have to make decisions every 5 minutes. And especially when we have the children at home, they can say, I want to go on a screen, I want to get on the Kindle, I want to do this. And you can say, well, but it's not 3 o'clock yet. No decision. And there's no argument with it, because it's not 3 o'clock yet. And that's when we said we were going to do that. And it's not Friday night. And so that's when we said we were going to do movie night. And it's not Friday. And that's really important, because it takes a big burden off of our shoulders. And, I know moms and dads are going to be working from home, but this is a burden that falls particularly on mothers, because we find ourselves and feel ourselves so very, very responsible for the emotional well-being of all of the people in our household. And so when they have big emotions that they're trying to process through, and that comes up in frustration and I don't want to, and door slamming, and all of the ways that it can come out, sometimes we can't think in the moment what to do. And so we need a schedule so that we don't have to make a decision in the moment, for the same reason that we need to have consequences that are clear so that we don't have to make a decision in the moment. When the 10-year-old repeatedly leaves his coat on the floor of the coat closet, the coat goes to coat jail, and he knows that's going to happen. And so he's not surprised. And eventually he'll make different choices, one hopes. So when students and families transition from school, in general, whether they've decided that we are done with this school and we're going to pull our kids and start homeschooling in fall, or whether, it's one of these kinds of scenarios that nobody has, ever imagined outside of apocalyptic literature, you lose that exteriorly imposed schedule and rhythm. And so it has to be replaced. And in particular, I would say it has to be replaced for very young children, and it has to be replaced for special needs students, because they need those reference points of we do things in this order. And if they don't have them, then they feel anxious because they don't know where the boundaries are. So how do we do that? Well, for one thing, we need to be dedicated to it. We need to know that we need to provide structure. That's part of our job as parent. And we need to understand that providing structure isn't taking away the child's freedom. Now, Maria Montessori, the 19th century educator, said frequently, follow the child. We all know Montessori, follow the child, but we don't always know the other part of that. What she also said was, freedom within boundaries. So the child is interested in learning to pour. There's a sensitive period for those kinds of sensorial experiences between the age of 3 and 6. We absolutely want to give the child freedom to pour within a bound of, you may pour water in these places and in these ways, so that we don't end up with a mess, which the child is not yet able to think about. Oh, if I just go in the bathroom and start pouring water, it's a lot of fun, and then all of a sudden we've got water leaking through them, from one floor to another. The child can't think of that. So we have to give that boundary. The child can't think about the fact that when school resumes, if we're completely off of a routine, however loose that routine is, how hard it's going to be to get back into that school rhythm. Parent can think of that. So that's part of what needs to be in our head. And I would really encourage you, don't let your children sleep in Monday through Friday. For one thing, there's a certain amount of things that need to be done. And for another thing, when the school resumes, if the children should go back to school in April or May, they'll need to get up to get the bus or to get to school. So losing that routine that you already have is not in anybody's best interest. And I would say in the same token, keeping a routine of we get up in the morning and then we have breakfast, we get dressed. We don't hang out in our pajamas. I know people talk about homeschoolers hanging out in their pajamas, and some homeschoolers do. But the work of the child is to learn, and so they need to be properly dressed for learning. If they are still in their sleeping clothes, that sends a signal to them that they can be sleepy and kind of hang around and I'm bored. We don't want to go there, right? Because we are physical beings. And because we're physical beings, the things that we do inform the ways that we act. So if your child is used to getting up in the morning and putting on a school uniform, have them put on a school uniform. My children have worn school uniforms for years and years because they don't go to school. The oldest one, who's 13 now, went to school for 1 year. When he was 4.5, 5. They don't go to school, but they wear school uniforms most of the time because it signals to them that we have a task to do. Okay, so that's one thing. Here's the next thing to think about. Look at what must be done. The what must be done. Everybody needs sleep. Everybody needs food. Everybody needs to be active at some point during the day. Everybody needs to do lessons if lessons have been sent home by your district, or if you're making up your own lessons. Either way, we need to keep feeding the life of the mind. And everybody needs to help tidy up, because guess what? If you've got everybody in the house all day, the house is going to be a lot messier. It just comes with the territory. So we better put some time for chores in there and figure that we're going to have to work on that. Those are the must be dones. Now, what about the personalities that are in my house? Some personalities want to just roll from one thing to the next, the next, the next. Some personalities need a little more time to transition from one thing to the next, the next. So you're going to have to think about that when you put your time blocks into your schedule. And finally, think about what we'll show on the screen. Yes, it will. What riches do you never have time for, but now you do because you're all home? So, is it music and making music and listening to music? Is it art and doing crafts and things like that? Do you want to have a regular, every night after we've gotten our stuff done, if everybody's done all their stuff, we're going to watch a different classic movie every night, and we're going to enjoy all these classic movies, and there's a ton of them out there. Of course, Netflix and Amazon and whatever you've got access. Make space because you have the opportunity to make space. And if you have to work, and so part of what you need to do is give them riches so that you can go make a conference call, don't feel bad about that, because that's where we find ourselves. And I would recommend to you, by the way, a really wonderful website that is run by a friend of mine that is called Working While Homeschooling. Her husband is in the Foreign Service. They actually live in Singapore at the moment. And she has been working and homeschooling all her life. Her children are in the early teens. And she has some wonderful, wonderful tips about how to work and homeschool at the same time, and how do you handle the fact that you need to serve your clients and you need to serve your children, and the sort of managed chaos of it. So I would highly recommend that resource. Hi, Jennifer. How are you? So now, what does a schedule actually look like? Let me erase some of this. My high school students will tell you that I am completely incapable. If I had a blackboard that was as big as the room, I would still run out of space, and this one's not that big. So, how do we divide up the day? Well, I think one way that's very, very helpful is to think in the Montessori parlance about the 3-hour work block. Now, what that means is not that you spend 3 hours working on a particular thing. What that means is that you set aside a certain amount of time that you're going to focus on a certain area. So, for instance, in a 3-hour work block in a Montessori setting, during the time when the students first come in, they're going to spend the first 3 hours working on tray works. And they're not going to work on one tray work for that whole amount of time. They're going to go do some literacy, and they're going to go do some math, and they're going to do something sensorial. They're going to do some practical life. They might spend 10 minutes in the Peace Corner. They might spend some time doing heavy work, but they know that from 9 to 12 is a work time. And then they know that there's lunch, and then from 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, if their day runs that long, is a time for playing outside and handcrafts and so on and so forth. If you think about the 19th century educator Charlotte Mason, who I highly encourage you to educate yourselves on, what many of the things, the critiques that she had of education in her day, we are now seeing played out in our day because changes were not made. But she was very firm on the idea that you need to have a timetable, and it needs to have time in it for all of the various parts of the body, mind, and soul to be used. So you had time for lessons, and you had time for outdoors, and you had time for handwork and creativity, and you had time for rest, and so on. So we like to use a 3-hour work block. Here's the cool thing about a 3-hour work block. It has 9 20-minute periods in it. And science, the neuroscience that's coming out these days, one of the things that it tells us is that most people can only concentrate on something with full effort and real ability to put their all into it for about 20 minutes. So 9 20-minute periods give you the opportunity to spend 20 minutes on English and language arts. And then stop using the language part of your brain and go do math, which uses a different part of your brain. And then in the last 20 minutes, come back to a foreign language, which is a language, but it's different, or 20 minutes of silent reading, which is language processing, but different than what you were doing before. And that helps you to rest the various parts of the brain. In the same way, we rotate back and forth between small motor and large motor work. And that continues, by the way, all the way up into high school. It's really, really, really important to do that rotating. So 9 20-minute periods. And in our house, we have, they run like this. From 6 to 9 is what we call our household block. So in that block, people get up, they do breakfast, and they do chores. And in our house, given the ages of children, they have specific areas of the house that they're responsible for. So somebody's responsible for the laundry, somebody's responsible for cleaning the kitchen, someone's responsible for cleaning the living room and the dining room public areas, someone takes out the trash, and so on. But here's the thing, that's 3 hours. So I don't go wake people up until 7:30 or so. If I wake them up after 7:30, then they have to rush. But this is leisurely. They don't have to rush. If they finish, I don't say, oh, well, go start your schoolwork. Whatever time they manage to save out of that block is theirs. And that's a huge incentive, especially to my little boys and the weather getting nice. They get up now at 6 o'clock and dash through their stuff so that they can go out in the morning. Then we have another block. Our second block is what we call our lesson block, and it runs from 9 to 12. And I'll show you in a minute, and I put into the Google Classroom, which the code is right here, I put into the Google Classroom actually a PDF of our time table for that. But the littlest children have 10-minute lessons or 20-minute lessons, and then the older children have a mix of 20-minute and 40-minute blocks, depending on what they're doing. But even there, we stagger things a little bit. So if they have a 20-minute block for literature, 40-minute block for literature, they're going to spend 20 minutes reading and 20 minutes either narrating aloud to me or writing a summary of what they've read. So they're not doing the same thing for that whole amount of time. And then we have lunch, and then depending on the day, we either have another lesson block for certain things that we can't cover. We just can't get them all in for the biggest children in that 3 hours. Or we have quiet time, and then outdoor time and free time, and then we have a second time to do tidying up and so on. It's not a full 3 hour block at the end of the day. But there's a rhythm to it. And so at this point, the children know that when they get up, they're going to do these things and so on. Now, you're going to have to do a little bit of training for that, some more than others, but it's totally doable. I think it's really important to include a creative block in there, some time to do creative stuff. And if you want to see what our blocks look like, here is. And like I said, these things are in the Google Classroom, but that is the block for the youngest two, who are almost 5 and almost 8. And so you see they kind of go back and forth in these little short 20-minute lessons. The 10 and 12-year-olds, as you can see, have a longer lesson. And the 13-year-old who's doing more high school work than not has more longer lessons, but also some shop time, because that's a very important thing to him. So I hope that is helpful in terms of thinking how to arrange your day. I can't say do it this way because everybody's day is different. I would give 2 other pieces of advice. One is stick to your timetable, because you're going to feel like, oh no, this isn't working, and you want to change it, but really stick to it for a week. Whatever it is, even if you just said, well, in this bucket we're doing lessons, and in this bucket we're cleaning up, and in this bucket we're all going outside. Because everybody needs some time to adjust. If it slops a little bit one way or the other, one block is 3 hours and 20 minutes, and the next one didn't make it, it's only 2 hours. That's fine. You have an adjustment period that's going on. And expect some pushback. Because the kids heard we're out of school, and the kids' idea was, awesome, I don't have to do anything. And we all know that wouldn't be good for anybody. I will be adding more resources to the Google Classroom, and I will be adding this video to the Google Classroom please feel free to message me with thoughts, ideas, questions. I'm hoping tomorrow to talk a little bit specifically about the 3 to 6 year old crowd, because I think they're the hardest ones for this transition, and some of the things you can do with them, and how to Montessori, provide some Montessori kind of experiences with household stuff that you have around already. And then I'll be talking about some other things, where to find math resources and so on. I know some districts are sending home packets. Some districts are like, you're on your own. And I'm looking at trying to figure out if there's a way to actually broadcast some of the lessons that we do, because it seems like that might be helpful to people. So thank you very much. Like I said, the Google Classroom code is right here. And feel free to join. PM me your email, and I can invite you. And then once you've got the invitation, you can click the link and it'll let you right in. Thank you very much, and have a great day.